Tonight, we step into the mud, the mystery, and the magnificent chaos of one of history's most extraordinary lives. We are talking about Joan of Arc, not the stained glass version, not the statue on a horse version, and certainly not the version your high school history teacher glossed over in 45 seconds before moving on to something less complicated. I mean the real Joan, a teenage girl from a village so small it barely registers on medieval maps. A girl who heard voices, convinced a king, and somehow ended up leading an army before she was old enough to legally do anything fun. Before any of that, though, she was just a girl in a village. Picture a village called Domrey in the Duchy of Bar in the year 1412. The sky is gray. The fields are wet. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is having a terrible morning and making sure everyone knows about it. This is the Lorraine, a borderland, the kind of place where kings and dukes make decisions in far-away cities and the consequences trickle down to the people who never asked for any of it. Joan's father was a farmer, a man of some local standing, but no wealth to speak of. Her mother taught her to spin, to sew, and to pray. The house was small. The family was close. The world outside was very, very large, and very, very large, and very, very dangerous. Joan was not a quiet child. The records from people who knew her describe a girl who was serious, who took her faith unusually literally, and who would sometimes leave the table mid-meal to go pray in the church. She was, by every account, ordinary in every way except one. At the age of 13, in her father's garden at noon on a summer day, she heard a voice. It came from the direction of the church. It was, she said, accompanied by a great deal of light. The voice told her to be good, to go to church, and then it stopped. She did not tell anyone. She did not run inside. She stood in the garden and she listened. And then she went back to her life as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and it would not stop happening. Over the next 4 years, the voices came back. They grew more specific. They no longer simply told her to be good. They told her who they were. Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret, and they told her what she had to do. She had to leave her village. She had to go to the Dauphin, the heir to the French throne, who was hiding in the south of France while the English held the north. She had to convince him to give her an army, and she had to lift the siege of Orleans, the city that was the last thing standing between the English and total victory. Imagine being 17 years old and being told this by voices no one else could hear. In a world where women could not inherit property, let alone lead soldiers. She did not go immediately. She argued. She resisted. She tried to live the life that had been planned for her, the life of a farmer's daughter in a small village, marriage, children, the same work her mother had done. But the voices would not let her rest, and so, at 17, she left. She left her father's house. She cut her hair. She put on men's clothes. And she rode on a borrowed horse through 350 miles of enemy-held France. She talked her way past soldiers. She talked her way into the presence of the local commander, who, against every instinct, against every rule of his world, gave her a small, armed escort and sent herself to find the king. She reached Chinon, where the Dauphin Charles was holding his diminished court. She walked into a room full of nobles, of bishops, of soldiers who had fought wars she had never seen. The Dauphin, to test her, hid among his courtiers and let another man take his place. Joan, who had never seen him before in her life, walked directly past the decoy, knelt before the real prince, and told him that God had sent her to crown him at Rheims and to lift the siege of Orleans. What she said to him in private, no one recorded, but when she came out, he was white, and he was convinced. He gave her armor. He gave her a banner. And, against the objections of nearly every adviser he had, he let her go. Orleans had been under siege for months. The professional soldiers had failed. The city was starving. The English were dug in. Joan did not arrive as a symbol. She arrived as a person who intended to do the thing. She argued with commanders who tried to keep her out of the fighting. She led assaults. She was shot through the shoulder with an arrow, had a wound dressed, and went back to the front. In 8 days, the siege was broken. The English retreated. A 17-year-old girl had done what generals had failed to do for 6 months. The soldiers who fought beside her said she did not swing a sword. She held her banner, and somehow that was enough. Then came Rheims. The Dauphin was crowned Charles VII in the cathedral where every French king had been crowned for 1,000 years. Joan stood beside him in her armor, her banner raised. The witnesses said she wept, not with grief, not with relief, with something else, with the sense that the thing she had been sent to do, the impossible, ridiculous thing the voices had told her to do when she was 13 years old in her father's garden, was finally, improbably, done. She knelt before the king. She hugged his knees, and she said, in front of everyone, that now the work was finished and she wanted only to go home, to her village, to her mother, to the cattle in the meadow. They did not let her go home. The years after the coronation were the years the statues do not show you. The king lost interest in her. The cutters turned on her. She was sent into battles she had not asked for with too few soldiers, against the advice she gave. In May of 1430, outside the town of Compiègne, she was captured. She was pulled from her horse by Burgundian soldiers, sold to the English, handed over to a court of bishops who had been assembled for one purpose, to break her to make her say that the voices had been a lie, that her mission had been a fraud, and that God had not sent her. They could not break her. For weeks, 70 bishops and theologians, trained men with the entire weight of the church behind them, questioned her. She gave them nothing they could use. They set traps in the questions. They tried to trick her into admitting heresy, into doubting her voices, into denying the king she had crowned. She answered every question with the quiet precision of someone who had nothing to hide and nothing to lose. The most famous exchange of the trial, they asked her, "Do you know whether you are in God's grace?" It was a trap. To answer yes was heresy, because no one could know. To answer no was to damn herself. She answered, "If I am, may God keep me there. If I am not, may God bring me to it. I would rather be in God's grace than anything else in the world." 70 bishops, weeks of questioning, and that was the best they could get from her. In the end, they burned her on the 30th of May, 1431, in the marketplace of Rouen. Joan of Arc was tied to a stake. She was 19 years old. She asked for a cross. A soldier made one out of 2 sticks and handed it to her. She held it as the fire was lit. The records say she called out the name of Jesus until the smoke took her voice. She did not recant. She did not doubt. She did not, even at the end, even with the flames climbing, say that she had been wrong about what she had heard. The executioner later said that he had never, in all his years, burned someone whose heart would not turn to ash. Her heart, he said, would not burn. She was 19 years old. She had never left the valley, and she changed the shape of the world. The citizens of Orleans remembered her for the rest of the century and beyond. They instituted an annual celebration of the lifting of the siege. While Joan was still alive, when she was captured, the city prayed. When she was burned, the city mourned. The city mourned. The city mourned. This was not the grief of people who had admired a symbol. This was the grief of a community that had experienced something together and knew what they had lost. 500 years of people have had opinions about Joan's voices. Each era has explained her in its own way. Fraud, mystic, martyrs, psychiatric case. The honest answer is that we do not know. We know what Joan said they were. We know what they told her to do. And we know that what they told her to do was, by any measure, achieved. The siege was lifted. The king was crowned. France was eventually France again. Tonight, as you close your eyes, maybe spare a quiet thought for the girl who tended cattle in the meadows of Lorraine and heard something in the light that would not let her rest. The voices came to her in light. Let the light tonight be the last thing you carry into sleep. Good night.